All right, so to get BloodHound open, right, I already have BloodHound on my chart here at the bottom, and we can see there's a button on the top that says empty template. So we're going to click on that button to open up the BloodHound interface here. And first thing you want to do is put a file name in there. So let's hit the change button. All right, August is almost over with. Okay, and so there is today's workshop date. Next, I'm going to start working on the logic board. So I'm going to click the logic tab here, start working on the logic board. And let's add our first logic template here. So to start working on the board, you need to at least start a logic template here. And let's see here. So what should we call this? And normally for you guys at home, you want to break your systems into individual files. So, because in this workshop, right, I'm answering a bunch of questions here, but normally, this kind of name here that I'm giving it, this is actually what you'd want to use for the file name, right? So you would want this system in its own separate file, right? So it's a good practice to put each individual system into its own file here instead of piling a bunch of different systems into the same file like I do in these workshops. All right, so just a little tip there for you guys at home. All right, so we have the fundamentals kind of set up here for BloodHound. So let's see, thinking this through here. So we want to make sure that there's no crossover. So if there is a crossover, right, that's going to invalidate the remainder of the day, right? A crossover is going to invalidate the signals. And so we're using crossovers in the opposite, in an opposite manner. So normally you use crossovers to validate a situation, but we're using a crossover to invalidate the signal. So to do that, we're going to actually use a toggle node along with some crossover solvers here. And we'll get back to this, but the toggle node, right, it has this starting state. And so the starting state is going to be on, right? So when we think about this, right, basically, it's okay to trade unless there is a crossover, right? So with this toggle node on, meaning we're going to use the toggle node to start off saying it's okay to trade, but if there is a crossover, we're going to use those crossover conditions to turn the toggle node off. And so if there are no crossovers, then that means it will be okay to generate a trade signal here. And if there are crossovers, like we can see here, right, there are a bunch of crossovers here, then we're going to use those crossovers to turn the toggle node off. Right, meaning, right, so if the toggle node is off, then that will prevent, any trade signals, occurring, during the Eastern, trading time zone there. Right? All right, so we'll put this toggle node off to the side for now. And so let's start with a bunch of crossovers that we're going to use to turn that toggle node off. So let's grab our first crossover here. Check if the 20 has crossed over the 50. All right, so I'm going to connect that into the result node there. And let me shrink things up a little bit there. All right, so for input A, that will be our EMA 20. So let's replace the SMA with the EMA. All right, there's our EMA, and change the period to the 20, right? And so moving averages typically only have one plot, so there's nothing to select for the plots. All right, and input B, that'll be our 50 EMA. So we're just going to do the same thing over again. All right, so here are some crossover signals, right? And so we're going to do this. Let's see. We will do this one more time. So we need one more crossover, maybe 3, but I don't think so. We identified the 20 crossing the 50, and I think we only need to identify the 50 crossing the 200, because let's see, I don't. Well, actually, no. I take that back. So it does look like sometimes we could get the 20 crossing the 200. Well, yeah, I guess that is possible, where the 20 could cross the 200 without the 20 crossing the 50. Yeah, maybe that is possible. So, all right, so we're going to create 3 crossover solvers, checking each of these EMAs, possibly crossing each other. All right. So I'm going to take a little shortcut here, and I'm going to go back to the solvers tab, and I'm going to make a copy of the existing crossover that we have here. So I'm going to make a copy of that, and this time we'll adjust this to see if there's any EMA 20s crossing the 200. So I'm just going to go into input B and adjust this to a 200 period. All right, so there's the 200 period. So now we have the 20 crossing the 200. And I will make a copy of this and check to see if the 50 crosses the 200. So I will adjust this to the 50 period. Just go in there and adjust the period. And there we go. So there's our 3 different crossover conditions, right? The 20 crossing the 50, the 20 crossing the 200, and lastly, the 50 crossing the 200. So there. All right, so now let me put those new crossover solvers on the board. So we're going to go to existing nodes, and there's those two new ones there. All right. Now we're going to plug all of these into an OR node. So if any of these generate a crossover, that's what we want to identify, right? So during this period of time here, right, the Asian session, we want to see if there's any crossover conditions. And if there are, let's see here. So if we look at the toggle node, right, the toggle node starts in a on state, right? So we can see that there's a long and a short output there. So it starts with the starting state, we set it to on, right? So now we're going to connect, right, our crossovers into the toggle node. And so if there is a signal coming in, we're going to turn the toggle node off. And so obviously, if we scroll way back here, right, let's see. Yeah, so we have a crossover right there. So there is our first crossover right there. And so we can see the toggle node starts on and then it gets turned off because because of that crossover, right? So basically we have a crossover signal coming out of our OR node and it turns the toggle node off. So now we need to turn the toggle node back on again right there, right? So just before our session begins here. Yeah, just before that session begins, we need to turn the toggle node back on. So we're going to use this time block indicator to turn our toggle node back on just right on the bar before our Asian session begins here. So let's see here. So we're going to grab a threshold solver here. So we're going to call this, so I'm going to literally put in there 1600 as our reset time here. Well, actually, this is going to be the 1545 reset, right? So the bar before our 1600 Asian session, right? That bar is going to be 1545. There we go. Okay, so the indicator that we're going to use to create this kind of reset signal is going to be the time block indicator again. So we're going to go into Shark Indicators folder, into the Tools folder, and there is our time block indicator. And so we only need to set up the time begin, right? The beginning time input parameter here. That's all we need for now. So, and we want to identify the start bar here, right? So the beginning time, right, is associated with the start bar, and the end time is associated with the end bar, right? So if you want to find out, more about, what are these various outputs here, and how they correlate with the begin time and end time, and of course, what days of the week we're using, you can go to the documentation page here for the time block. So I'll bring that up in just a moment here. So, but for now, we just need to set the beginning time, and we want to identify the start bar here. Let me click OK. And we can leave all the thresholds at 0. And what we want to look for is, right, is a value greater than 0, right? So A is set to 0. So we want to generate a signal there and a short signal as well. And if you look right there, so if you look, BloodHound is generating, right, a long and a short on the bar, right, just before, just before the session begins. And let's see, let's scroll forward, right, there we go. So there is our signal. And we can use that to reset our toggle node every day, right? So every day our toggle node gets reset. And so, let me go back into the toggle node. So back to the toggle node, right? We can see that our reset is set to no action, but actually we want the reset to turn the toggle node back on. There we go, right? So we can see the toggle node gets turned back on until we get a crossover. And so once again, we had a crossover, turning the toggle node back off. Right, let's go back here. So we can see the toggle node is turned back on. And right, and there's no crossover. So the toggle node is left on. And again, right, I did mark with these squares that there were no crossovers. And then we did get a crossover. And let's see here. So once again, our toggle node is turned. So we did have a crossover here, right, during the trading session. And so, so you can see that once we get out of this Asian session, if the toggle node is still on, then we will need to ignore. Now we need to actually ignore our crossovers here. So we need to, take the toggle node, and during the trading session here, we need to ignore these crossovers here. So if the toggle node is still on, once we exit this overnight Asian session, if that toggle node's still on, we will need to extend it now until the next session begins here, right? So we'll need to extend that so that we can allow for these pullback signals to be generated here, right? But for now, right, we're just focusing on identifying if a crossover occurs. And of course, every day we have to reset that toggle node during that overnight Asian session, right? And again, we can see that there's another crossover, right? There we go. So it turned that toggle node off during our Asian session. All right, so let's work on, let's see, right here. Yeah. So again, this is not a good example. This is not a good area to work on because there were no crossovers. So our toggle node, as we can see, just stayed on down here. But here, we did get a crossover, right? So if there is a pullback that will generate, a entry signal, then there's a good chance that there's going to be a crossover, right? And that crossover will turn off our toggle node. So we can't rely on the toggle node to stay on after a pullback signal occurs, right? So we'll have to take this toggle node, and here's adjust that, and we'll extend that forward. So we now will need to get into a signal extender. Okay. So with the signal extender, I'm going to have to figure out how many bars, how long do I need to extend this toggle node? So I'm simply, let's see, I'm simply just going to count. Actually, I'm gonna just disconnect everything from the result node. That way I can kind of clearly see my time block indicator here. There. Also, I'll just adjust my square. All right, so it looks like I need to extend for 39 bars. Yeah, but also we're going to need to turn the signal extender off as well. So, right, so at, yeah, I think, hold on. All right. So one thing to note about NinjaTrader, which is can be different from a lot of other trading platforms, is that NinjaTrader, right? It is the time that you're seeing is when the bar closes, not when the bar opens, right? So it's so a lot of I've really kind of gotten used to this since I've been working with NinjaTrader for so long, but it was something that I did when I first started using NinjaTrader, right? I did have to convert things in my mind a lot because NinjaTrader was different than any other trading platform I had used in the past, in that NinjaTrader is identifying when the bar closes, not when the bar opens, right? So when I see, so so when you're working with time, you do have to sometimes do some conversions in your head here. So like right here where my cursor's at, right? This is when the bar closed. Yeah, so this bar, it actually existed from 1545 until 1600. So this bar actually opened at 1600. So this bar was actually the 15-minute period before 1600. So I need, so just, be aware of that because, I think I need to make an adjustment here to my time block indicator. Yeah, so for visual reference here, I'm going to, make an adjustment here. So my start time is actually, 15 minutes afterwards. And there we go. Yeah, so it's just to help me out here, right? Yeah, so again, this bar closed. Yeah, this bar closed at 1600. So now, even though this bar, so the timestamp on this bar says 1615, but it does include 1600, or I'm sorry, so it starts at 1600. So it starts after, so this bar here is 1600, but it closed at 1600. So we don't actually want to include that bar. All right, so let's get BloodHound open and let's make some adjustments here. Yeah, we can ignore that for now. All right, let's go back to the logic board here. Yeah, so this, it is really easy, to, when you're working with time within NinjaTrader, you probably will have to go back and make adjustments, to time-based situations, because NinjaTrader is providing you the ending time of a bar and not the opening time here. Yeah. I don't know. Something's just telling me that I might have to go back and adjust this again. Yeah, I will adjust this for now until I see a situation where I need to correct this. Well, not correct, but readjust this back to the way I had it. So for now, I am going to actually adjust this back to to 1600 for my reset signals here. All right. Right, so again, I am actually adjusting our reset signals back to 1600 instead of the bar before. Right, so again, just to kind of go back here and reiterate what I'm doing. Right, so I have this threshold solver that's providing, reset signals to the toggle node. And so for the toggle node, what it's doing is it's turning the toggle node back on when the Asian session begins. So this gray area here is just to help us visually see the overnight, Asian session when we're checking to see if there were any crossovers or not, right? So if I go back here, right? So here was a perfect overnight session with no crossovers, right? Which is what we're trying to identify. And so we have to reset our toggle node to turn that toggle node back on, right? So that starting state for the toggle node, right, needs to be on. And then again, if there's any crossovers, that toggle node gets turned off. But then for the signal extender, okay. Let's see here. Yeah, so for the signal extender, let's see here. Yeah, so this is taking a bit of thought here because we're doing things in kind of an opposite manner here, in kind of a reverse fashion. In that, right, normally we're looking for crossovers as the condition that we're looking for. But here, that crossover is actually turning, or the crossover condition is what prevents a trade, or prevents a setup situation from occurring. So we're having to reverse these things in our mind here, or at least reverse things for the logic. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I was trying to take an easy, so yeah, so kind of as a good practice, right? You should try and keep things as simple as possible. And so that's what I was trying to do here, is keep things as simple as possible until, otherwise, shown that you need to take a more difficult route. So I was taking, right, our toggle node and just feeding it into the signal extender. But I think what I'm seeing here, actually, so what I think I'm seeing is I might have to take a more difficult route. But let me review this a little closer here first before I'm positive that I need to take a more difficult route. All right, yeah, so I will use this as my example here to explain that, yeah, that the simple route isn't quite working out. So yeah, so I'll use this as my example here. So just a moment. There. All right. So let's look at this overnight Asian session here. And we do have a crossover that occurred, right? So our toggle node, right? This toggle node here, which is being used, right? So let's kind of explain this in full here. So the toggle node is being used to identify or track whether a crossover, right, occurs during the overnight Asian session, right? So the toggle node is identifying rule number one, right? So we're trying to identify this EMA situation here, right? So we're trying to identify, right, this fanned out situation to make sure that it's true. So we do have this crossover, and so our toggle node gets turned off. And I was trying to take the easiest solution here, which is take the toggle node and just extend it. But that's not working out because when this crossover occurs, well, what the signal node is, or what the signal extender is doing here is when that crossover occurs, that's when the signal extender is taking that invalidating situation, and that's when the signal is occurring. Or sorry, the signal extending is occurring. So what I need to do is actually wait until this session ends, and that's when I need to take a snapshot of the toggle node and see, is the toggle node still on or not? So I need to what's a good, trying to think of a good way to explain this. Yeah. So I need to inject something right in between the toggle node and the signal node. Gosh, sorry. A little bit of a loss for words here. So at this point in time, that's when I need to check. And so if the toggle node's still on, that's when I'll use my signal extender and extend that there's a valid situation for the rest of the day, or sorry, for the rest of this period here, rest of this period here. Yeah. Let me grab a square, and this area here is where the signal extender will be identifying that. Then we can be looking for the pullbacks here. All right, well, where we left off here is that in between our toggle node and our signal extender, we need to create another condition here where before we use the signal extender, we need to identify if the toggle node is still on this specific bar or at this specific period in time here. I'm going to create another threshold solver here. So I have one that is resetting my toggle node right when the Asian session begins. And so now I need another threshold node that's identifying when the signal period can begin. So let's take a look at the rules again. So this threshold is identifying when the Asian session begins to turn the toggle node back on, and so now we need another one that identifies when the signals can begin, and if the toggle node is still on, then we'll feed that into the signal extender, and then we can look for the pullbacks. So let me extend that out a little bit, and I'm going to go to the solvers tab, and I'm going to make a copy of this threshold solver, and this will identify when the signal extender should be extending the toggle node state. So this will be the 6 a.m. or 600 hour signal here. Let's see, what would be a good name for that? So I'll just call this the 600 hour. So let me go into the time block and adjust this. So our begin time just needed to be adjusted to 600 hours, and we're going to leave the is start bar, we're going to leave that as it is. All right, so there's our new solver. So let me put this on the board. So we're going to go to the existing nodes, and there's our new threshold solver. And if we connect that in, so there is our signal when the Asian, basically when the Asian session is ending, and but more importantly, right, that's when this period of time ends. And if there's no crossovers, then our toggle node will still be on, and that's when our signal extender should be looking to see if that toggle node is still on, and that is when we want to extend the toggle node. Let's see. All right, I'm going to tuck that in there. And so I need a AND node. Connect that in. Connect that in. And now let's take a look at that AND node. So here we can see the signal. Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, when there's a long and a short together, you don't really see the racing stripes. So we'll just have to look down at BloodHound. And so what we're looking for is if there's no crossovers, then out of the AND node, we should see a long and short when our little block time, or as the rules would put it, that's when we can look for the pullback. Yeah, so I guess we could say that that's a part of rule 2 here, right? If there is a signal coming out of the AND node, that's when we can get to rule number 3 here, is waiting for the pullback. So let's take a look back through the chart and identify or verify that this is working here. All right, so here's a crossover where that little triangle is, and there's no BloodHound signal, or there's no long and short output when this block of time ends here. And once again, there was a crossover here, so there's no long and short output here either, coming from this AND node. Right? That's there. Let me scroll forward on the chart. All right, so here once again, there's no crossover during this Asian session, and so we do get a signal. Right? So that's probably the real key to today's lesson, to this topic, is so this is something new here that I don't think we've done in the workshops before, is identify when there is no crossover situation during a period of time. All right, so here's the next Asian session, and there was a crossover, and so there's no signal coming out of the AND node. Again, there's crossovers here, no signal. And here we go. So again, I used these rectangles to identify when there should be a signal, I've used these rectangles to identify when there's no crossover. And that's when we'll be looking for the pullback. All right, so there's crossovers, no output, crossovers, no output. I don't think, yeah, oh, sorry, there we go, one more. So again, no crossovers, and here's our signal. So, all right, so let's connect that into our signal extender. And here we go. So here is our opportunity. So coming out of the signal extender, that is identifying our opportunity when a pullback should be looked for here. All right. And now that I have our little time block set up correctly, we can see that actually there is one bar missing here. Let me stretch this out a little bit. There we go. Right, so we can see that there's one bar here, the actual 1600 bar, which is from 1545 to 1600. Right, because remember, 1600 is when the bar closes. So the bar opened at 1545. So this bar should be included here. So I'm going to go back to the signal extender, and I had a feeling that this signal or the number of bars should be in multiples of 4, right? Because there's 4 15-minute bars per hour. So there we go. Just knock that up to 40, and let's see here. And what's going on? Oh, that's right. So the reset. Yeah, so our reset is resetting right on the 1600 bar. And with the signal extender, if you get a reset signal coming in, the signal extender turns off on that bar. So if there is a reset signal coming in on a bar, yeah, the reset signal turns off. So we need to actually delay our reset signal coming into the reset connector. We need to delay this by 1 bar. So the signal extender doesn't turn off actually on that bar. So it's a little different from the toggle node. So the toggle node gets reset after the reset signal, right? So again, let's go back to our toggle node here, right? We're using the reset connector, and right, so we're using this reset threshold solver to turn our toggle node back on, right, when the Asian session begins. And so the toggle node turns on after, right, on the bar after. But the signal extender, you know, if a reset signal comes in, the signal extender will turn itself off immediately on that same bar. So I need a look back node to add a delay mechanism, right? So our look back node can be used to add a 1 bar delay to our reset here, right? So we're using this displacement, which is defaulted on by 1 bar here, and that adds a delay, a 1 bar delay. That's what NinjaTrader's displacement function does, right? If you ever opened up any of your indicators, you'll notice every indicator has a displacement setting here. And if you turn that on to 1, it's going to delay your indicator by 1 by whatever this displacement number is. So that's what we're using to create a 1 bar delay. Oops. So I'll just rename that. There we go. And so now our signal extender now is extended all the way out to this last bar here, to this 1545 to 1600 bar right here. There we go. All right. So let's take a look, another look through the chart here. Let's scroll all the way back to the beginning of the chart. All right, we have a crossover. So no output, no permissive, crossover, no permissive. Here, let me get rid of that triangle there. That was a little confusing. All right, so here's a rectangle, right? Identifying there's no crossovers, and we have, right, a output for a long or short signal from the signal extender, right? So during this trading session here, or during this signal session, right, when we can get trade signals, we can see it's on here. So that is our permissive, or our verification that there's no crossovers occurred. Right? Once again, no crossovers, and we have an output here. There, we mark that a crossover, and there we go. So there's no output here, so no signals can occur. All right, so on and so forth. Oh, yeah, here's another one, another day where there was no crossovers, and we have our long and short output to allow for those pullback signals. So now we need to look for the pullbacks. All right, so let me go back to the beginning of the chart here. We'll use this day. We'll start here. And let me make a quick adjustment here. You'll notice that there's text down here. That's from the time block indicator, telling you, what the current bar, where it's at here. I'm just gonna go turn that off. Oops. So on the time block indicator, I can turn off the text. There we go. This show text, you can turn that on and off. There, I'll get rid of that. There we go. And also, before I get going too far, let me pull up the time block documentation here. So let's see here. Actually, what I'll do is, we can ignore that. I'm going to go to help and go to documentation link. And then if I just go to the support menu, documentation, and then here, other indicators, I can click on the time block indicator. And if you go to the outputs for BloodHound here, right, here's an explanation of what all of these outputs are doing, right? So you can open those all up, and right, just a simple description of what each of these outputs, when these outputs get turned on and when they're turned off, right? So again, you can just look for outputs for BloodHound, right? And that is the time block indicator here that I'm using for my reset signals, right? And that's what all of these outputs are that you see here, right? And they're all bool, and a bool is a true or false, right? In computer language, a boolean is true or false. So these are either on or off, true or false, right? On or off. So that's what that's doing. So if you want to, read up on what these other outputs are for, they are pretty self-explanatory. But if you do just want to just double check, there's a description for all of them. So, all right, okay, let's get that out of the way. All right, so we've accomplished rule number 1. We've identified that there's no crossovers. And rule number 2, at the same time, right? So rule number 2, no trades until 6 a.m. So this output that we're seeing now is the permissive, which will allow the trade signals to occur. So let's take a look at BloodHound's logic that we have so far. right? So this is our crossovers here. Those are our various crossovers, and we can name this OR node here. There we go. So that's our crossovers. Then we're using the toggle node as our trade permissive, right? We have our reset signals here. So our toggle node, right, needs to be turned back on every day in case it gets turned off. You know, if there is a crossover, right, it'll turn the toggle node off. And so at the end of every day, we need to turn that toggle node back on. So that's what our reset signal is doing here. And then, let's see. So then with this AND node, we're checking our permissive at 6 a.m. And so again, we have another threshold solver, right, that's identifying, right, the 600-hour bar, right? So, and then we're feeding that into the signal extender, right? And so we know that if we're on a 15-minute chart, right, there's only so many bars until we get to the 1600-hour mark, right? So if you go and make any adjustments to this, mainly, for example, you know, if you switch this from a 15-minute chart to a 10-minute or a 5-minute chart, you know, just keep in mind that you're going to have to adjust the signal extender, you know, for the number of bars in between here, right? So the number of bars that we have, you know, between these two time periods, between 600 hours and 1600 hours, right? The number of bars there, that needs to go into the signal extender. So that, you know, extend signals 4, that needs to be adjusted for the number of bars in between here. So if you make any adjustments to this time, to the chart's time period, then you also need to make adjustments to the signal extender as well, right? Actually, you know what? Yeah, let me make this a little more universal here. Let's take out the signal extender and we'll replace it with a toggle node. So we have all the bits and pieces here to use a toggle node. Yeah, I think we can just connect that up right like that. Let's see if it all works. Yeah, there you go. It's all working. Okay, cool. So with the toggle node, so this toggle node is actually being used in a, you know, quote, normal fashion, where when a condition occurs, we're turning the toggle node on, right? This toggle node back here, we're using it in a reverse fashion where the toggle node starts on and then we're turning it off if a condition occurs, right? So again, this toggle node has a starting state of on, and we're turning it off when it gets an input, right? That's kind of a reverse of, you know, a normal situation. And this toggle node here is being used in a normal fashion where it starts off, but then we're turning it on. So if there is a signal that comes out of the AND node, we turn our toggle node on. And then at 1600 hours, we're then turning this toggle node off, right? So the reset is turning the toggle node off, right? So when we get to our overnight Asian session, right, we can see we're turning that toggle node off, right? So there. Okay, so I can just get rid of, delete that signal extender there. So now we can do this. Now, if we go in here, I should be able to just switch to a 5-minute chart. Yeah, a 5-minute chart, probably going to get crossovers. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it's not going to work on a 5-minute chart. Too many crossovers. I think a 10-minute chart should work, though. Yeah, there we go. So on a 10-minute chart, it works. Yeah, we had a couple of really good down days in the Japanese yen. So there we go. All right, let me put this back on a 15-minute chart. All right, so next, rule number 3, waiting for a pullback into the EMAs. All right, so this pullback here. So first we kind of need to figure out, what is the trend direction here, right? And, we could do a more complicated, we could make this more complicated by identifying, is the 20 above the 50 and the 50 above the 200. However, if they are, if the 20 is above the 50 above the 200, chances are that 50 is going to be sloping upward, right? So I'm sure that in every situation, the 50 EMA is always going to be sloping upward. So, so what I'll do, so I'm going to grab a slope solver here. And we're just going to look at the 50 EMA slope. And that will filter out the trade signal direction for the day. There. All right, there we go. So the 50 is obviously sloping up on this day. So now let's grab a AND node. Okay. So now, right, we took that, basically that we took the toggle nodes, trade permissive, and we've now filtered it for, let's see here. Oh, look at that. So actually, that did not work out. Interesting. All right, we're going to have to figure something else out here. So, I know. Let's maybe take this, we'll take this slope solver and let's bring it back to this previous AND node. Let's see if that works. And what's else? This opposite signal. Well, still that's not working out. Yeah, that 50 EMA it rolled over just at the last minute there. So, all right, let's get rid of that slope solver. That's not working for us. So I'm going to go back to the solvers tab here and just remove this from the system here. So, you don't want extra nodes hanging around. Yeah, it's just a good idea to not leave extra nodes laying around because, it does suck up, processor power, right? So, all right, so instead, let's do a comparison, right? We'll make a comparison instead. we'll just compare the 20 to the 50. So if the 20 is above the 50, then we know we're on a long day. All right, so input A, that will be our EMA 20. Input B down here, and that will be our EMA 50. Yeah, there we go. All right, and this guy, again, we can move this comparison solver back here. And there we have it. All right, so we have two, all right, 2 up days. And so now our permissive is now, only allowing long signals here. All right, so we're looking for a pullback that will generate a long signal. Let's scroll. Yeah, there we go. So here's a down day. Bingo. All right. So we should be good with that. All right, so getting back to our rules here, so rule number 3, it's waiting for a pullback into the EMAs, right? So we're going to have price crossing at least the 20 EMA, right? So we need to pull back into the EMAs. Yeah, so we need at least crossing the 20. So we're going to use a crossover. All right. Now, you never know how deep, the market might cross the EMAs. So it could be that, you just get the wick pulling and crossing the EMAs, right? So the rules don't say anything that the close of the bar has to cross. It just says, that basically, we're for a pullback. So, that could be just the wick, right? So for a long, it could be just the low of the bar crosses the EMA 20, and then takes off again, right? It depends on how strong the market's moving, right? You never know how deep those pullbacks might be here. So for our crossover solver, right, I'm going to use the low price of the bar for a long, signal, or the high of the bar for short signals. So input A, right, that's going to be price. So for a long, we're going to set that to the low. And for a short, we're going to set that to the high price there. And input B will be the EMA 20. Like so. Now, price is going to be crossing down, right? So if we're in this uptrend, price will be crossing down. So we don't want, short crossovers. And let me see here. Yeah, I'm just looking at everything, and it looks wrong, and it should look wrong because, we're looking for the low price to cross down. So Yeah, so instead of using the crosses in direction, I'm going to use the cross against direction. And now things are going to look correct. So, right, so let's take a look at this, right? So here, if we look at the low prices here, low goes from here, down to here, down to here, right? So I'm drawing a line connecting the low prices. So we can see the low price crossed down the EMA 20, and so it generated a long crossover, right, in the opposite direction of the crossover. So that's crosses against direction is going to reverse your crossover signals, right? So the low price crossed down, but we actually got a long crossover signal. So that's what we're looking for, right? There's our cross down. So we know that, you know, price, it broke the EMA 20 at least, right? And so now we can look for the pullback there. So let's see here. So that can go into that. There we go. Let's see. And so now I think now we just look for price to reverse directions, right? Well, yeah, let's do this here. Let's grab a bar direction just in case. Right, so if we look at the bar direction, right, so we need some down bars, right? So this pullback needs to, you know, the pullback needs to have will consist of down bars, right? So let's see here. Yeah, I was thinking of just inverting the output here, but the problem is, you know, we might get a doji bar. It is possible to get a doji bar. Yeah, like right here, this doji bar. Well, actually, yeah, you know what? That's okay. That doji bar will generate a long and a short, right? Because there's no bar direction for a doji. So it generates a long and a short. So I guess, you know, I guess the doji would be acceptable during the pullback there. You know, as long as the low moves down low enough to cross that EMA 20. So yeah, I can take a bar direction and just invert it here. That should be fine. All right, so we'll just call this a reverse bar direction. I'll connect that in like so. All right. So, all right, so there's basically, you know, we've identified that a pullback's occurring. And so now we need to get right to this reversal bar here. There. And we don't know how many, you know, down bars this is going to last. So especially, let's go back here. Yeah, I was hoping this would be a better example of a bunch of down bars here. Actually, you know what? Yeah, looking at this kind of pointed out that actually a crossover's not working. You know, we better, yeah, so we better just check to see if the low goes below the EMA 20 instead of looking for a crossover. So as this kind of illustrates here. All right, so let's take this out of the equation here. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to go to my solver tab and I'm going to remove that crossover and we'll just use a comparison solver. Yeah, so that crossover was just too restrictive, right? Just simply checking to see, you know, is the low price below the EMA 20, right? That tells you that, you know, that the market did indeed pull back into those EMAs. All right, so I'm just going to set this comparison solver up exactly the same way I set that crossover solver up. Right, so for a long, we're looking at the low price of the bar. And if we're in a short trend, we'll be using the high of the bar. Input B is going to be our EMA 20 again. All right, so now I need to reverse the outputs here. Right, so with the outputs, right, so I'm looking for a long, right, I'm looking for A to be below B. And what's A? A is the low price. I want the low price to be below the EMA 20. Right, so there we go. We can see, yeah, we can see the EMA, or the low is below the EMA. So, and a down bar. Here, let me just, all right, I should have connected that up like that. There we go. So as soon as the low of the bar is below the EMA 20, right, we can see down here we're starting to get a long output, right there. So, and if the high is above the EMA 20, I'm getting a short output, right? And so we can see that there's 4 bars here where the bar is actually straddling the EMA 20, where the high is above and the low is below. And so we're going to get both outputs there. All right, but that's okay. No, that's just that one simple condition here. But when we look at our AND node, right, we can see that it has to be a down bar and the low price has to be below the EMA 20. And now we're getting that long output. So that's telling us that we're in a pullback. We're actually in a pullback. So right, so that's what that AND node is telling us, is that we're in a pullback. So, all right, so now let's see, let's go back here. Yeah, there we go. So we're in a pullback and we need to wait for this reversal bar here. So let's see, we need to extend this pullback signal. Right, as we can see right now, right, there's no output on the actual signal bar. Right, we're only identifying the pullbacks, and so we need to take the pullback output and shift it forward a bar, you know, at least 1 bar to get to the signal bar, right, where price reverses and goes back in the direction of the trend. And so we can just simply use a look back here, and we're going to use this displacement function here. Like so. Let's connect that in there. There we go. So there we go. Those 3 down bars are pullbacks. You know, we can see the long output was now shifted forward 1 bar onto that signal bar. So now we're almost there. So now we need a inflection solver, and the inflection solver will identify those price reversals for us. So our input is going to be price. And we'll just look at the closing price, right? Did the closing price, you know, reverse up or did it reverse down? And so we can see, right, when we go from these down bars to this up bar, we're getting a long signal. And then when we go from these up bars to, right, the down bar, we can see that the closing price closed down. And so we're getting a short when that closing price, right, reversed down. So we can take this with another AND node, and there we have it. Okay, so there is our first pullback signal, and we actually get a second one here, right? So we did get another bar here, another down bar, and then another reversal back up. So let's see here. So now we need to isolate this to only 2 signals per day. Yeah, so we can see here that, you know, this is going to occur quite a few times here. All right, so two signals per day here. So this will this will require a signal counter. I'm going to plug that into here. And with the signal counter, it's actually counting signals, but so we're using the signal counter in an opposite manner, in that we're using the signal counter to actually block signals, right? So we want to block when we get to the 3rd signal. You know, that's when we want to block, right? So we want to allow the first 2 through, and then if there's a 3rd one on, we want to now block the signals. So we're going to count up to 3. Let's see, our look back period. Well, we know that with 15-minute bars, there could be up to 40 bars. Well, there are up to 40 bars during this trading period here, right? So we'll set our look back. I think it's safe if we set the look back to 39, just 1 bar short. There. And let me connect that in. So let's take a look here. Actually, I'm going to mark these signals. All right, so if we look at the signal counter, okay, we can see that as it's counting signals here, right? It turns on on the first signal, right, we get a little bit of an output here, like 1/3 of an output. Then when we get to the second signal, we get 2/3 of an output. And then when we get to the third signal, right, the signal counter is on 100%, right? Because it counted 3 signals within the last 39 bars, right? And so right now it's in, it's defaulted to fuzzy logic mode here. So let's switch this over to digital mode, right? And so now, there we go. Once we get to the third signal, then now we're blocking. Or when we get to the third signal, that's when we want to start blocking the third signal onward, right? So or let's see, actually, yeah, we can use the value at 0, I think. Let's see here. Yeah. Yeah, we can use the value at 0 instead here, right? So we can see that the signal counter is on, and so it will be allowing long signals to go through. So when we get to the first signal, right, it's going to allow those longs on. The second signal, right, the signal counter still on with the long output, so it'll allow the second one. But then when we get to that third signal here, we can see the long output turns off, and so that would prevent the long signals from going through. And so now with that, we can grab another AND node, connect that in like so. And there we go. Yeah. Let's see. Let me go back here. Take a look here. Yeah. This actually, sorry. Let me get my chart adjusted. There we go. All right, yeah, this generates a lot of pullbacks here. There we go. Yeah. And let's go forward on the chart and see what we have here. There we go. There's our down day. And I think we have one more day here where there might be some signals. Yeah, there we go. There's a long day. Let's see. Yeah, I would imagine there's probably a signal there. And probably one there. One around there somewhere. Something like that. There. There we go. Okay. So there we have it. I think we are done. Let's let me just check the rules here. Yeah, I think I have it. So let me take a look at the Q&A window here in just a moment. Let me get this all up. Yeah, let me get this all open here. All right. There you go. And don't forget, guys, you can always name your AND nodes here, right? So, so this AND node basically is telling us that we're in a pullback, right? So if we connect that into the result node there, so we can see, right, all the pullback bars there, and then we can see all the signals. So this is actually all the signals, and then this is only 2 per day, right? Or really not 2 per day, but 2 signals per hour, trading period. Oh yeah, and let's see, there's one more thing I need to do here. Let's see, I should use the reset connector on the signal counter. I probably don't need to, but it's probably just good practice to use the to put a reset in there. And so the signal counter shouldn't start counting until we're ready to start trading, right? So the signal counter should only count right after the 1600 bar, right? Or actually this bar, here we go. That's our 1600 bar. That's when the counting should start. So we should reset the signal counter on that bar, and that would be this guy right here. Let's adjust this around a little bit. There, something like that. All right, so the signal counter, let's go into the resets here. And let's see. Yeah, so we're using the reset signal. All right, yeah, so I didn't actually need to adjust anything. Yeah, the reset signal is already on for us. So that's all I needed to do was just connect. Remember, this solver here, right, is identifying our 600 bar. So connecting that into the reset of the signal counter. So now, because this was built so cleanly, right, all the signals in here is built very cleanly. So that's why I don't think the signal counter really needs to be reset, because it is so clean. And by clean, what I mean is, let's see here. By clean, close this here, right? So in other words, there's no signals going on inside our Asian session, right? There's no signals going on in here. So that makes this a very clean kind of built system here. So the signal counter is not going to be counting any signals inside of this area. So that's really why the signal counter doesn't, that's why the signal counter doesn't really need to be reset, because this is very clean inside of here. But if somebody does decide to kind of go in and adjust things, muck around a little bit in here, you never know what might happen. You might start getting some signals, occurring in here, which could kind of dirty up the system. So just from a kind of a good design practice, it's good to just reset our signal counter, at the 600 bar. so that just to make sure that it's not counting any, rogue signals that might be occurring, during our permissive period, during that Asian session. All right, there we go. We'll leave it at that.